quickly, hopefully, how we developed and integrated a statewide DMR system to serve as our redundant communications for emergencies. And I'm going to discuss a little bit about the collaborative approach we did between the amateur radio community and the served agencies that allowed the system to be built. This slide you're looking at shows the agencies that got together and are the key agencies that put together the DMR system. And you'll notice we've got South Carolina Educational Television, South Carolina Emergency Management Division, Department of Health and Environmental Control, State Law Enforcement Division, and then our volunteer group that sort of holds all those together is the South Carolina Hospital Emergency Amateur Radio Team. And that group supports communications for OXCOM, ARES, and RACES. So what we're going to do tonight, Steve indicated that it'd be good to, I guess, give an overview, a real simplified overview of DMR for those that may never have dealt with it. And also discuss the model that we use in South Carolina to both implement and integrate our systems. And I'll cover a little bit of a personal story, how we actually conceived DMR and how it was implemented, which I think may be more fun than anything else. So what is DMR? Well, obviously it's an acronym like everybody else, Digital Mobile Radio, and it's a European standard protocol for transmitting information. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, in our case, we're using the Tier 2 standard, which is a 12.5 kilohertz FM modulated carrier that contains two data channels. So DMR uses a digital voice systems AMBE +2 vocoder that both will compress the data of the audio coming in and digitize it. And on the reverse side, it will decompress it and turn it back into audio. And to make it as simple as possible, what really makes DMR really interesting, it allows multiple talk groups on one repeater. So I can have two simultaneous independent conversations at the same time over the same frequency pair. So it's like getting the price of two repeaters for the price of one. So pretty cool. And plus it's really easy to link the repeaters together over normal VoIP or IP connections rather. Okay, let's look a little bit what I just said. If you take on this side over here, you have a typical FM modulated carrier for the amateur radio. It's 25 kilohertz wide per channel, and you can have one conversation. When we go to DMR, the DMR is actually 12.5 kilohertz wide, which is half the amount of space. But here's the kicker. It uses time division multiplexing, which we split up every conversation in about 30 milliseconds chunks and sequence them into 2 time slots. So I can have 2 simultaneous conversations effectively using 6.25 kilohertz, and it works really, really good. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what is really cool about digital modes. Well, one, it is supposed to give you improved coverage over an analog system. So geographically, you'll get a little better coverage than you'll get out of a regular analog system. Since it's using TDMA, you're only turning the radio on and off while you're transmitting, and it's synced to the repeater. So you actually get better battery life. It uses bandwidth, well, it uses less bandwidth on a crowded spectrum. It really eliminates noisy radio traffic. I mean, DMR will be very, very clear to it's not there at all anymore. And by linking them via the internet, you can cover a region, an area, multi-state area, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And the other thing I thought was cool about it, DMR allows you to take relative signal strength measurements at the receiving end and on your radio if you've got a Motorola radio. Some of you Chinese radios don't do that, but I can take my radio and actually do a sequence of things, and I can tell how strong the repeater is hitting me. And if I look at the bridge, which we'll talk about later, I can see how strong I'm hitting into the repeater. So, and it also has text messages. So cool. Now here's what the big takeaway that was really touting on DMR. If you'll notice a typical FM repeater, if you've got a strong signal into the repeater, you've got good audio. As your signal gets weaker into the repeater, it's almost a linear fall off. And as you get over in this area, you'll start getting lots of noise. You'll get to the point that you can hear somebody's there, but you can't make out what they're saying. With the digital technology, the signal stays strong in 100% with no packet drops all the way over in this area. Then in this area, you'll start getting a few packet drops, but once you get about here, it just goes away. There's nothing, it's just gone. So what I've noticed a lot of times when you're talking to someone in DMR, you'll hear a few packet loss. If they're in a low spot, it may come back up, it's good. If they're getting toward the end of the fringe of the area, the next transmission, you won't hear anything and they're just gone. So it's a little bit different for use, but it's very impressive on how it's worked. I also want to talk a little bit about some new terms. And in the new terms, we've got talk groups and zones. If you think about your typical analog repeater, you have a frequency pair and an encode decode tone. And that's really a talk group for an analog repeater. That's all it designates the talk group. In a DMR, it's a little more complex because you still have a frequency pair, you receive and transmit. You have a color code, which is very similar to the encode tones. But then you also have a digital contact code number, which defines what talk group you're going to be on. And you also have a time slot, since you've got a possible 2 options for every repeater. And only those those other subscribers are listening to that same digital contact number on the same time slot will hear the code. In other words, they won't hear your audio. It's like you're not even there. You don't even know someone's on the repeater. So I've got all this set up because I can have, as I said, 2 independent conversations on the same repeater at the same time, but I can have multiple talk groups on that same repeater, but I've only can have 2 independent conversations at one time. A little bit different. DMR radios use zones to organize their talk groups. It's generally by a geographic area. And you can mix analog channels within the zone. So if you think about, I always like to think it's about like a file cabinet. And I can put common files in there. So if I'm in the Columbia downtown zone, we have a repeater there, and we call it the Columbia Downtown Repeater. All the potential talk groups for that repeater are stored in that zone. Plus, I may have the other analog repeaters in that zone and some SC Heart DMR repeaters in that zone that happen to be downtown. So once I get in that zone, I've only got a small section I have to look through to see where I want to go. This may demonstrate it a lot easier. The very top area of this slide shows you a typical analog UHF repeater. You have your transmit, your receive, your encode, your decode tone. That would be your talk group. On my East Columbia DMR repeater, my zone says East Columbia, and you'll notice here all the frequency receives, all the transmits the same, the color codes are the same, but I've added a contact code over here and a time slot. So when I come over here, if I want a local conversation on our system, it's 27500. That's my digital code, and it must be on time slot 1. Everybody that programs that in will hear anyone that comes up on local and starts talking, and it does not interfere with the other channel. If I want to talk multi-state in normal mode, like PRN Talk Group goes across Virginia, or parts of Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina. That digital contact code is just 2, but it's on time slot 2. So frequently we'll have someone talking locally in the downtown area on time slot 1, and we'll have somebody in the downtown area talking to somebody in North Carolina on time slot 2 at the same time, which is really cool. And the other ones are just the other ones you see on the list are just other talk groups that are programmed in our system. Okay, let's talk about a little bit about a network. Repeaters are linked together using internet protocols. There's multiple bridge vendors. Now remember, DMR is a commercial system. It was not built for hams, it was built for the commercial world. So there's multiple vendors out there that not only furnish the repeaters, they furnish the bridges, they do the radios. When we first came out, there was only like 2 or 3 vendors that had equipment was compatible. What we run into is we went with the Motorola solution because they were the ones that were on the market in 2013. Their ability to connect to other repeaters is somewhat more difficult. We're starting to see solutions for that now, but up to this point, once you went with the Motorola repeater, it was really easy to continue to add repeaters as long as they were Motorola going to the same bridge. So anyway, I'll get in the story just a little bit, but let me tell you a little bit about the South Carolina amateur radio environment. You know, unfortunately, South Carolina has experienced a long series of disasters. And personally, my first involvement goes back to 1989 in Hurricane Hugo. At that time, I wasn't even a licensed operator, but I had a primary support mission within ESF-1, which is transportations. And I saw that amateur radio played a significant role in helping the state reestablish communications downrange because it took out power and a lot of communication from Charleston into Orangeburg, which is, you know, a good 60 to 80 miles in from the coast. After Hugo, I got my license and I found it very useful, and during subsequent responses that I took with me anytime we had a hurricane response. And since Hugo, the state's periodically been hit with tornadoes and more hurricanes, ice storms, even train wrecks. And amateur radio has always been able to provide support when needed. Now, we'll be honest with you, not every county in South Carolina uses radio volunteers, and a lot of it has been due to bad past experiences. However, the counties that have developed relationships with their amateur operators are their best and most supportive champions that we have out there. And if you ever get them in the meetings, they will tell you how great it is to have a backup amateur radio systems, which is, I'm gonna leave that's going to help us. Okay, let's talk about an amateur radio initiative, which again starts building the bridges, how we did all this. Charleston amateur radio operators had a large impact after Hugo, and they decided, working with the healthcare system in the Charleston area, they really needed better coverage, and they found they could do that by linking all the local repeaters together. And this was to support the next hurricane, or we do have an earthquake zone in Charleston, and we're overdue for one. So they developed that locally. Then come along a few years later, we're doing an evacuation. And what happens when we have a hurricane approaching the Charleston or the coastal areas? We move patients from healthcare facilities inland. A lot of times some go to Columbia, some even go as far as Greenville. And during one of these evacuations, interstate became a parking lot. We had areas where we didn't have good cell phone coverage, and some ambulances could not talk to anybody. And in other words, there was a problem. So the people in Charleston got together with the South Carolina Healthcare Association, the Department of Health and Environmental Control, South Carolina Educational Television, South Carolina Emergency Management Division, and the Medical University of South Carolina. And they started a program to take this linked repeater concept for amateur radio statewide. And they called this new system, or the new program, the South Carolina Healthcare Emergency Amateur Radio Team. And it's a good acronym, but it's more than a team. It's really a program. With funding from the Department of Health and Human Services, Educational Television installed 15 VHF and 15 UHF repeaters at their facilities, with most of these repeaters linked on the state microwave backbone to an IRLP server at ETV headquarters. SC Hart was formed with a club with amateur radio operators, and SC Hart is the trustee of the club. The analog network was used to support healthcare in counties during emergencies, but normally the system's open to any licensed amateur operator to use. We have had emergencies in the past. We've used both hospitals on one side, like UHF, and the counties on the VHF, and have county to state EOC, or we put them together. It all depends on the type of emergency we have and the need for communication and how we configure it. It's totally configured by the operators in Columbia. So, and by putting these things at the state or South Carolina Educational Television, there was a reason why that was done. Post Hugo, Bell South, through the Pioneers program, installed a statewide packet system. And the packet system operated from early 90s into the early 2000s. But after establishing it, Bell turned it over to local amateurs to run and maintain. By 2005 or 6, none of those sites were running anymore. They were gone. The whole statewide network was gone. And one of the persons of my good mentors, John Crockett, which I will talk about later, was a key executive at ETV, and he knew what had happened. And he said, we can't let this happen again. If we get this system in, we need to write it into a charter that some organization is responsible to maintain it and not individuals. The amateurs can run it, but again, we need a system that will ensure its continual maintenance. Thus was born the SC Hart program. SC Hart is a program where volunteers supporting hospitals and healthcare facilities such as nursing homes and shelters volunteer to support communications and be part of the radio response team for those areas. It's also a statewide network of repeaters, which is managed and owned by the Educational Television Network. Volunteers provide quarterly FCC license training, followed by license exams. Volunteers provide weekly on-the-air training nets for the healthcare facilities and the general amateur radio community. A nonprofit supports enhancements of amateur radio in South Carolina. This is also called SC Hart. It also maintains 4 deployable kits, including shares WinLink capability and amateur radio, 2 meters and 440. And we have a communication trailer that can deploy that has not only amateur radio, it has state communications capabilities. And if you're ever wondering about it, you can go to this webpage that I'll show on the screen, and a lot of information about it. And if you have a question, you can post your questions there and get them answered. So, okay, I mentioned that. So let's talk a little bit about the South Carolina collaborative model. South Carolina adopted a collaborative model for building relationships and trust between the amateur radio community and emergency management officials. State agencies operate as part of ESF support function as defined in the State Emergency Operations Plan, and amateur radio is included under the ESF2 communication section of the State Emergency Management Plan. Local coordinators have the lead role in developing relationships at the counties and local levels. And volunteers are expected to demonstrate professionalism in dress and attitude. They're encouraged to take FEMA and state offered training with agency employees and practice in drills and exercise. This gives an opportunity for them to learn the people in the agencies, and it gives the agencies opportunities to learn who it is supporting them. And it's important that we break at the mental stovepipes that are out there that I'm a rarest person, I only do this. I'm a racist person, I only do this. I'm a Mars person when supporting agencies. When activated, a volunteer becomes part of a communications unit, regardless of the organizational background they're coming from. The operators there are to move their messages or set up equipment. And that is to be done and accomplished by the most effective way you can do it. I've heard one of our state leaders make the comment. He said the organization you serve isn't interested in the logo on your hat or your shirt or the politics of your internal organization. They're interested if you can get them the correct information to the right location at the right time. And as we will talk about a little bit later, this may not even be amateur radio. You may be using a different system. You may be using something with the state. You may be using something in amateur radio. You may be using something with a federal system. The next slide I want to talk about is, okay, how did we build a relationship with the state agencies? I think a concerted effort started back in 2009 when we asked to gauge the needs of our state emergency management agency for our amateur radio support. And Steve indicated I am a DEC at the state EOC, and we did a detailed survey of state emergency management, which also included their employees and some counties, of what they expected from the ARIES and the RACES groups when they were activated. Then a select group of amateur radio operators active in ARIES and RACES, along with those who work for state agencies holding communication responsibility, jointly developed a strategic plan for communications. It took several months to do. And it was commented on by the volunteers around the state that were ARIES and RACES, but it was pretty much done by some DECs and the state communications people. And as it was being developed about the same time, our ESF2 people became aware of WinLink through a presentation that Steve Waterman did in about 2009. And they determined that the state's preferred method of email traffic for backup would be WinLink. And at the time it was WinLink on the agency Mars program, then it moved over to the DHS Shares program. So once the strategic plan was done, 2010, ARIES RACES came out with the first South Carolina ARIES RACES Tactical Communications Guide. This applied to all our field volunteers. It discussed redundant and layered communications concepts. It incorporated the DHS Shares WinLink email data into the state plan. And it provided how local, regional, and statewide networks would be used during emergencies and how we could fall back to VHF or HF simplex if necessary. Then in 2012, the plan was revised to integrate the SC OXCOM program. And each year the plan is revised and updated. Repeater information from the plan is carried over and published in the South Carolina Field Operational Guide, which is available for iOS and Android apps on your phone. And additionally, in 2012, the volunteers started hosting monthly meetings for agencies to better coordinate interoperability coordinations. That effort has now moved from the volunteers who hosted the meeting to the South Carolina Emergency Management Division. However, the chairperson for the meeting remains a volunteer radio operator. So that's where we were in 2013. So let's begin the real story. I will say that relationships are built at the restaurant and the coffee shop. It's critical for amateur radio operators to build a working relationship with agency personnel they're serving. And you should look for opportunities. And I always say, if you see a lot of states, I know our state has an open thing that you can sign up for any FEMA talk class in the state. Granted, some of them are virtual now, but an amateur radio operator can get in the class, and it's a way to meet people. I met my first state people back taking classes after Hugo, and I still friends with some of them. So it's a good place to start. So our South Carolina DMR story started on a Friday in October 2013 during a lunch at the Flight Deck restaurant, where a bunch of hams were sitting around doing things hams love to do, eating and talking radio. Steve Davis, N4UHF, was telling a bunch of us about a new Moto Turbo radio system that the local power company was installing. And those technicians that were putting it in were blown away at how good it was working. They were saying the coverage is way better than their VHF analog system. The radio supported cool features like texting and messaging and radio alerts. And as he's talking about this, somebody, I won't say who, said, we should put up a DMR amateur radio repeater and do our own testing. I mean, after all, what are we doing? We're letting them get ahead of us. Well, that started a lively conversation around the table about who would be willing to jointly buy a radio, or buy their own radio, but jointly buy the repeater. And then if we got the repeater, what frequency would it be on? If we got, where would we put it? To get a frequency, we had to have a place to put it. So initially we got a few people said, well, I might be interested. And Steve offered to go back to Motorola and get us some price quotes. And it turned out right then, Motorola was pushing DMR. And they said, if you turn in any old LMR radio, we'll give you $100. So that sounded like a pretty good discount. So, okay, so that's where we went. Immediately after leaving the restaurant, I gave John Crockett, W3KH, he was just finishing installing the SC Hart amateur analog network. And I said, John, we just had this thing we're talking about Moto Turbo, and we're thinking about putting up a Moto Turbo repeater, and we're looking for investors, and would you be interested, and where could we put it? Well, John says, I think I've got a site for you at Little Mountain, and I'd be willing to be investing, and let's go do it. I'm all in. So within a matter from October to November, we were searching to try to come up with a frequency to use. And initially we were going to VHF, but our coordinating body with VHF would not coordinate any VHF frequencies, but would give us a 440. So 440 it was. And we ordered the equipment. It came in about Christmas, and we actually started the field test in January. Another relationship thing was, after we get the equipment order, the equipment's coming into my house, and I'm gonna have to program the radios, and I've never seen DMR before. And once again, John Crockett said, well, I got a personal friend up in Raleigh, Danny Hampton, K4ITL. You ought to give him a call. I knew him back when I was at NC State University. So I called Danny, and Danny says, oh, yeah, we're putting up this whole network. And if you want to, we'll let you connect your DMR test repeater to our network, and you can be part of the North Carolina network. And why don't you call Scott Whitaker, KF4DBW, and Scott can help you come up to speed really fast on how to program the radios. Best call I ever made. we, in a matter of a few hours, I became a DMR programming expert. And from loading the software to actually program my first radio and testing the repeater on a test bench here with the bridge in Raleigh. Really cool. And so the next day, John and I go up to Little Mountain, and fortunately the site already had a 440 capable antenna. And so 4 days after the equipment arrived, we had the repeater installed and we were ready to do field testing. And Little Mountain turned out to be a great site because John, again, was an engineer from NC State and for ETV. The background noise was about a -127 dBm. We had a co-located 2-meter repeater. We had a co-located D-Star repeater, and we had network connectivity via the ETV microwave system. So the next few weeks, we're running around doing all kinds of radio tests, comparing it to the 2-meter, comparing it to D-Star, and talking to people all over North Carolina. And the conclusion was, DMR provided about a 4 dB better capture ratio than analog, meaning that we could get signals, solid signals at the site down to about a -123 dB without any loss. Error correction was way better than our D-Star repeater that was up there. And we also played a little bit with voice texting and GPS locations. So thus begins the statewide network. SC Heart had proved to be a really great asset during emergencies. During the first few years of operation, we uncovered a few challenges. One challenge was when the repeaters were linked in the statewide configuration, all the traffic had to move that were local had to move over to other repeaters because they were jamming the statewide network with their local network. And these antennas, and some of these antennas are at 1,000+ feet. So they have large geographic coverage. So the system could come very busy during some of the exercises and a couple activations. So we started discussing, well, what about if we really need a leadership command and control and coordination traffic? How would we do that? Well, the field test at Little Mountain gave us a potential solution. So members of Comm, Aries, Races, Mars, CAP, and the State Guard were all amateur radio operators, had been using the SC Heart network during our activations. So we were saying, well, we were wanting it for tactical traffic, but what about command traffic? So we came up with a proposal that, well, let's put in another network, a DMR network, to support command channel. And not only can we have a command channel for the Aries, Races, and Comm folks, for statewide, they can still have a local command channel on the local side, and we won't interfere with each other. We only got to buy one repeater and have one set of antennas, etc. We presented the DMR command and control concept to the State Communications Work Group in the spring. The work group said, hey, I think that's a great idea. You reckon we can go ahead and get funding for it? But with their endorsement, we said, we'll go try. So we proceeded and were able to get grant funding from Homeland Security via our state law enforcement division with endorsements from emergency management and educational television. Once again, we're using the model that was done on the analog system. ETV would own the equipment and it would be operated under SC Heart. Okay, we obtained the initial DHF funding for phase 1 build out was for 11 repeaters and the conference bridge. That happened in 2014. This is how fast this thing got put together. And then phase 2 grant came through in 2015 that funded 14 more repeaters. So 90% of these repeaters were linked via the state microwave system, which means that losing the normal internet had no meaning because we were on a radio internet connection. The Rayfield conference server, which was installed at SCEMD, had a backup installed for it, and all the radio equipment was programmed and installed by amateur volunteers. Quick video or quick picture here. One on the right shows you, if you look right here, that's the DMR. That's the DMR, a duplexer, and this is a combiner. Now, what we did to try to leverage existing systems where we had already a VHF and a UHF repeater that was part of the SC Heart, we bought combiners and used the same antenna and same feed line. If you'll look over here, this is a 2-meter repeater, and you'll see these big cans. That's a combiner for VHF because we have the SC Heart VHF system at Rock Hill, also sharing the same antenna with the Civil Air Patrol, which again, we help support. Okay, systems moving on. Things are looking good. Private companies or private individuals and some clubs now say, can we join your network? So we had to come up with policies to how we do that. So the SC Heart SCEMD advisory group developed a policy for any external repeater connection. Essentially, this group is volunteers and agency employees that support the network management, training, marketing, the nets that were conducted for ETV under SC Heart. We also have people from EMD on the advisory team and DHEC. SLED is there, and people from ARL, Aries is there, and RACES. So while we were hashing this out, we came up with, okay, any repeater that wanted to join us, they could. The proviso would be they need to have backup power. They were responsible for their own network connection. They were responsible for their own equipment, and ETV would provide the bridge that would link the repeater, but we would only provide the standard talk group configuration of the system for both our normal mode and emergency mode. So currently we've got 30 fixed sites operational, 2 mobiles and 2 portable repeaters that's available. The mobiles and the portables can be hooked by satellite or cellular back through the regular internet to get back into the bridge. Quick look at what it looks like. If you look at our coverage map, we've got really good coverage except this area right in here. We do have money funded through the nonprofit to add a repeater at a state site there. We're working on internet connectivity, but that's still underway. Okay, now we're getting to the meat and potatoes of how it's being used. Normally the DMR system's open for any amateur radio operator to use it. We carry the same talk groups on every repeater and the same repeater or talk groups are carried on the North Carolina system. That's a local channel, a multi-state channel, a Chat 1, Chat 2 channel. Those channels are set up so any 2 people operating a repeater can be talking, say one person in Charleston and one person in Raleigh. Instead of tying up 60 plus repeaters, they can go a chat channel and they'll only tie up 2 repeaters, the 2 they're on. All the rest of them will not be phased. Some of the guys in South Carolina said, well, I want to have just one for South Carolina repeaters. So we created a SC call that will only go out over time slot 1 for the South Carolina repeaters. We've got a talk group where you can do a test, so you can test your audio, etc. So this, like I said, system's open for all amateur operators. Here's the only difference what happens when we go into emergency operations. It's configured at the state EOC. We declared a controlled net is starting. All talk groups are restricted within the state of South Carolina, with the exception of one talk group that we have that operates from Raleigh. We can talk from the state EOC in Columbia to the state EOC in Raleigh. We can local areas and races people and OUTSCOM people can use the local channels for command and control, They use the PRN channel for statewide command and control. Most of the traffic usually resonates from the state EOC to the county EOC, and that's on PRN. And it augments the analog repeaters. If they get really busy, we'll handle tactical traffic over there. Wrapping it up, bringing it home. Conclusion, the DMR network was installed to expand amateur radio capabilities and shows how, by working with support of state emergency management, South Carolina Educational Television, DHEC, and SLED, and they were critical in building out the SCR network. And operators continue to volunteer their time and equipment expertise to these served agencies. The DMR is an excellent example of how the amateur radio community working with agency partners to fill the capability to support citizens during an emergency. Very cheaply, I should add. And during normal times, the repeaters are open and we use them to get people to practice their skills. Sorry about that, wrong button. Takeaway. Now, these are my personal takeaways. Developing good relationships with served agencies and establishing mutual trust can aid you in obtaining resources for common objectives. Time spent working with agencies help you understand their needs and requirements, plus they will understand you. Developing strategic plans around agencies' defined objectives can aid your organization when seeking support. This can be both political or financial. And I can't stress this enough because I've heard so many SEEKs and Comm and out of the Comm Use say this. Agencies are looking for professional communicators, not amateur operators. They really don't care what your hat says. They do care how you work as part of an integrated CommU anytime you're deployed supporting an agency. And I would like to take this opportunity to dedicate this presentation to John Crockett. We lost John in 2016 after a valiant fight with cancer. John was the chief network design engineer for the SC Heart system. He was a Southeastern Repeater Association director, an ARRL life member. He was the vice president of engineering for ETV and a very good personal friend of mine. Without John's tireless effort, we would not have the SC Heart system. With that, a couple of links here. There's the link for the SC Heart again. If you're interested in North Carolina PRN, there's a link to them, the DMR standards. And if you're interested in our tactical plan, it's located on the ARES website. With that, I'll turn it back over to you guys.
I just want to make two comments. You wouldn't have WinLink if it weren't for John Crockett either. That guy called me on the phone and said, how much would it cost for you to come over here for, I don't remember what year that was, come over here and give us WinLink training. When I got there, he had people, he had AT&T, he had your organization, he had North Carolina over there. It scared me to death. And then gave me an excellent tour after it was all over with of his fine city. So we owe a lot, you're right, to John Crockett. And I want to make one other statement. The statewide interoperability coordinator for South Carolina and the communication manager are both here supporting Roger, a volunteer. And that just shows you what kind of commitment this state has toward people like Roger who are doing wonderful things for their state. I guess, Dan, go ahead. Your turn.
Okay. My turn. Okay, everybody. I thought I had, and I will double check. Yeah, speaker view. So I don't know why you should be seeing me out there now. I hope so. Not that I'm that great. I want to thank Roger for a great presentation. That was really good. We got some comments, a lot of different comments in chat. And of course, if you want to raise your hand, we'll catch you in that direction. So with that in mind, Barry, you want to take off with the chat comments?
Well, most of the comments and everything was answered by Phil Sherwood, who was a great help and provided great answers to everybody in the chat. So there's no questions right now, so we're looking for hands. Someone did have their hand up, but they lowered it. I don't know what happened with that question.
Okay, you might go. You might share your turn your video on when you have that backed up. It's just a little tiny dot on our screens. Okay.
Dan has a question, and JM from
I see that. I see that. Okay, Dan, Lodi, Dan, go ahead and take it.
This is a rare occasion where you misspoke, Barry. I have lots of questions, not a question. But first of all, I want to thank Roger. This was the best presentation about DMR that explained pretty much a lot of what I didn't know, because I don't know anything about DMR except Brandmeister. And I'm very thankful for that, because all of a sudden lots of things are making a lot more sense. I'm going to leave it there, let other people ask questions, and I'll bet the rest of mine are answered. But thank you, Roger. Great talk.
Okay, if I know Dan, he'll be back. Jim, I think it is JM, N5XFW. You want to go ahead?
Well, I'm going to sentiment the speaker just before me. I think my questions are going to be answered. It was, this system does not touch Brandmeister at all. Is that right?
That is correct. At one time, about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, we carried a link to what's called DCI Bridge, which went to Brandmeister. Their audio and their reliability was so bad. And of course, when we go in emergency mode, that was shaved anyway. So right now, all of our talk groups in normal mode are only between North Carolina and South Carolina. The EOC to EOC talk group, there's work to maybe spread that to the regional EOCs in Tennessee, Georgia. That is underway. But no, we do not carry Brandmeister or any of the other worldwide talk groups. Again, we tried that. We did not, we're not pleased, I would say, of the quality of the conversations. And ours is a closed ecosystem with our bridge. Anything we got was fed through the North Carolina bridge. It provided us additional IT resiliency, if you would, but no Brandmeister.
So just as a follow-up, this is coming on the same exact network that the state system is on, if I understand. And in that case, if there's a failure on your system, on the microwave or backhaul, does that kill everything? I would assume it does.
No. The statewide 800 megahertz system does not ride on the microwave. That's their primary state communications, interagency communications on 800. What's riding on the microwave is the SC Hart system and the ETV broadcast feed to the ETV stations. ETV is currently putting in to all the station transmitter areas fiber. So we'll have dual redundancy. We'll have fiber with microwave backup to all those sites.
Okay, so the state police in South Carolina, I believe, are on a single system, and then everybody else is on something else, even though they may be co-located on a tower. Is that right?
Well, the 800 system is an interoperability system with a lot of the state agencies. Most of the state agencies, I would say, is on that. A lot of local agencies are on that, but that is not on the microwave system.
Okay, thank you very much.
That was a very good question. Is there anybody else out there who wants to raise their hand?
I got a couple of questions from the chat.
Okay, go ahead, Barry.
Laura from North Carolina wants to know, are hotspots of approved users allowed? If not, why not?
Again, it is a closed ecosystem. So no, there is no connection to the internet It's only connected to the North Carolina bridge.
Okay. So that means individual hotspots are not.
No hotspots can connect to the system.
Okay, great. And also another question, how would you describe the difference between DMR and trunk radio?
Well, when you start looking at trunk radio, you think that the newer trunk radios, you key the microphone, there's a service channel, and it assigns what frequency you're going to be on, and it changes frequencies. DMR don't do any of that. DMR has 2 time slots, and only 2 time slots. You have to program the repeater, and you have to program the time slot. And when you're talking that time slot, that's it. There's no smart about it. The DMR will not recognize where your car or your vehicle is. So if I want to send out a text message to you, which I can do, it sends it out on every repeater to try to hit you because it don't know where you are, whereas trunk stations knows where you are. That's the easiest way I describe it.
Okay, that's a good explanation. That's all the questions in chat right now.
Cool.
Okay. One more shout out there. Anybody got any questions or comments at this point? Come on, OD, Dan, don't disappoint me.
Just a reminder again, part 2 for South Carolina, more to the liking of MCOM, will be this next Thursday, which will start our series about what agencies expect of us.
Gabe has his hand up, Dan.
Okay, I might. Oh, I made it in there. I might comment in the chat. I put the document in there. It shows the series. You're welcome to take that. We also send it out with all the invitations. Okay, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, this past week or last week, there was some that went around that had a Region 4 FEMA DMR Talk Group that I looked and found on the Brandmeister Talk Group list. Is there something else going on in addition to the system that you're describing that isn't exclusive of interconnections with Brandmeister?
I think that question was directed to me. Yes, there is. And I'll share you my personal view. Brandmeister is a good system for ham operators. It's not a reliable system. And you can probably check with some people in Tennessee and other states. You never know when the conversations is going to go through. We could say one of the reasons we got out of Brandmeister altogether is that you could sit here and hear people talking, and sometimes you would hear both people talking, sometimes you'd hear one person talking, but they'd hear each other. It was unreliable as far as getting the internet connections through, and the more people that hotspots got on, the more unreliable it became, and that's when we dropped it.
I can attest that what you're saying is absolutely true. But the appeal it has is that it is a flexible and open enough system for amateurs to screw around with, and that's exactly what happens.
Exactly.
So, yeah, there's no question in my mind there. And one thing you said, I'm sure, was a verbal typographic error. You did mean microseconds instead of milliseconds in terms of the TDMA slices.
I think it's milliseconds, 30 milliseconds per division. I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember.
It's irrelevant. It's a teeny tiny question. I'll look it up. But it just, I recalled that. Okay. Anyhow, I'm looking forward to learning more about it, because I think you got a model there that could be very, very useful. And the fact that, Brandmeister is its own worst enemy in terms of use for emergency communications.
Absolutely.
There's no point in arguing that. If you've spent time working on it, trying to make reliable, recurring use of it, in addition to the trash on the trash talk groups, you do have that issue to worry about. The RSSI is all over the place from hour to hour, given weather conditions and what everybody else is doing worldwide. So having a closed solution makes perfect sense. All right, I'm going to shut up now because you'll answer other people's questions.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I'm on the wrong pad. That was last week's questions.
Are you done, or can I bring it over to somebody else?
Yeah, pass it on. I'll be back.
Okay, Gabe, go ahead and do it. Take the show.
Yeah, real quick, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you, Roger, for presenting that for us tonight. And I will be presenting next week's segment, and looking forward to it. Hope you guys get some information out of that. But I just want to second what Steve said and Roger said. Our partnerships here in this state is our bread and butter, starting all the way up with the ESF2 folks, Bob, down through our organization, all the way down through a lot of the other folks. And Roger has been an integral part of our entire mission for many years now. And so I just wanted to say I appreciate it. Thank you, Roger, for that. And good job.
Okay, I would like to also at this point, I want to thank Roger. He's done a great job, and we're going to see more of him, I'm sure. I want to call out Steve. Steve Waters, he doesn't get the credit he deserves. Like I said, I had this idea bouncing around for a long time. I don't know if I called Steve, he called me, doesn't matter. It was not related, and I said, Steve, as long as I got you on the phone, and he took it and everything you see and is coming up is because of him, and I really appreciate his efforts and what he's doing. I also like to comment, as we go forward and a lot of this stuff comes unveiled, if the agencies and the ham organizations and such have some more stuff that they want to do in order to make things happen, we're more than happy to accommodate those efforts. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Tom. He's got his hand up.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I wanted to ask Roger, just from a snippet of stuff he said, in comparing trunked radio, which I think a P25 is trunked, is that accurate? Okay. Trunked radio, in our experience up here in Maryland, can sometimes be rather brittle because we had a little critter no bigger than your thumb, a shrew, chew through a fiber optic cable and put a whole county radio dark for 4 hours until a lot of people climbed in the hole and spliced the fiber together. And they learned a lesson from that. Now there's 2 fibers and they're in different places. But without that central computer, the system just choked and died. Does the difference with the DMR make it less brittle, less breakable?
Okay, in order to get wide area communication, you've got to have a link between the repeater and the bridge that's doing the packet routing. You lose that and the repeater goes in what our 800 people call standalone trunking. It sits there and will operate all day long as a standalone repeater. And interesting thing about the DMR repeaters, I told you before you had to have a contact code. It don't care what the code is. Whatever comes in, it's going to spit out in the time group you told it to go out on. And but it will still operate locally. But yeah, I wouldn't say it is as susceptible, but in our case, the DMR is a network connected computer repeater, and so therefore you've got to have that connection to get over to all the other repeaters that you're wanting to talk over. Other than local. If you want to talk local, you can talk local all day. It doesn't make any difference if all the lines are down.
Always good to know. Laura, you got a question for us there? W3QA?
Yes, sir. Question for Roger. I salute you for the closed network and the way that's maintained. I think that's just great. But it seems to go against the philosophy of the connection to PRN. Can you tell us the reasoning for that?
When you say closed network, you're talking about, well, PRN provides our link to North Carolina hams. Again, whenever we go into emergency mode, that link is broken. It's basically to allow people in North Carolina and South Carolina to talk to each other, because we do, from an area standpoint, have a very interoperable relationship. and with the idea that if we get in really big trouble, we're going to ask North Carolina to help us out. And if they get in big trouble, we plan to go up there to help them. That was something that John and Tom Brown worked out early on when we put the system in. Plus, I think the fact that North Carolina was instrumental in us getting connected and getting our system up. And they, in fact, Scott and I still share duties in keeping the bridges up. Does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, I think it makes sense, but it still opens you to the average amateur community, is it not?
Well, I mean, our system in South Carolina is open. When you're down here, anybody drives through the state can use the system.
But you say you're activated, then what do you do for a link to the North Carolina EOC?
We have a
You drop the
separate,
system.
we have a separate talk group that only comes out on the Cary Raleigh repeaters.
Oh, okay. Missing that part. Appreciate that.
It only comes out in the Cary Raleigh, and it only comes out on the 2 repeaters that serve the SEOC here. So
Okay.
that's the only link that's to it. And the idea is, and again, we had to change our ham hats. The idea is that any request from South Carolina to North Carolina for any mutual aid assistance has to come through the state EOC. And we don't want people out there calling another state and say, oh yeah, we need, you send us some hams down here, send some radios, and the state EOC doesn't know about it. That's not a good thing. So the idea was to minimize traffic. We segment segment North Carolina off, and we still have communication to their EOC if we need any kind of resource coordinations. So the resource coordination would come through the state EOC.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you, Roger.
Sure.
Thank you. Appreciate the question there also. Lodi Dan, go ahead.
I saw a question that pop up on chat that I've got too. The question was, is your system using C-Bridge or some other bridge between your repeaters? Which technology bridge are you using?
It's using the Rayfield C bridge,
Okay. And
which is commercial.
I was going to badmouth well, I won't.
Good plan.
Enough already. So do you have any thoughts about a backup microwave system? The thought that you're able to make use of the South Carolina educational TV microwave just rang a big bell, because that means you've got microwave towers within sight of each other through most of your infrastructure. So is there any thought about building just a backup system with Arden radios? Probably not 802.11c yet, but sort of takes care of itself, optimized link stake protocol, routing protocol?
The answer to that is no. The ETV network, like I said, is putting in fiber to their transmitter sites. So you're going to have fiber with fall over to microwave, and we'll be on both. So we'll have a dual path method to get to the transmitter sites.
Well, you don't need to hear me say 1 is none, 2 is 1, 3 is me, but okay, thank you. And the last thing was, I actually don't know how other states are organized. Are there medical, health, operational area coordinators in the Southeast states? Or is that a unique California thing? 'Cause I'm just wondering how you can and are integrating the folks that have to communicate between hospitals in a mass casualty situation.
Okay,
if
that's
communications aren't there.
okay. That is usually done through our Department of Health and Environmental Control. A section of them handles the hospital mass care, and there's let's see, 4 healthcare coalitions in the state, and those 4 coalitions work independently. And they talk to each other. So each one of those has a coordinator, which sort of sounds like what you're talking about. And if it's beyond the local area coalition, then they come to the state area, and the state area then determines if another coalition can help them, or if they have to EMAC data from out of the state. So that's sort of how we're
Yeah, I'm asking if your system has the capacity to handle that traffic during some kind of major incident.
The answer to that is yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I love the questions. Great questions out there, folks. Great presentation, great questions. Makes for a good presentation. Any more questions out there?
We're good.
And the chat looks good?
Yep.
Well, okay, we'll wrap this up. I'll leave it open afterwards. After everybody checks out, if you want to check back in, just visit, compare notes, you're welcome to do so. So anyway, I'll get this out there and get your information where you can see the videos and share them with who you like to share. Thank you a lot, everybody. Really appreciate what you did. Thank you for coming. I'll say
Dan?
something. Yeah, go right ahead.
Can you tell us how this is going to be available? I'm going to have to show this to the SWIC tomorrow.
Okay, what happens, and the part will get done to tomorrow, but I put it out on video, I think it's called, and then I put a link to it. And also, we also put a YouTube link out there too. So it's on YouTube and in that. So you'll get both of it. Any documentations is on this that you also get also.
Now, I got this link from South Carolina. I think, will it be on, or rather, I'm sorry, on the Oxcom group on Facebook. Is that where that's going to be?
No, send me an email at k7rex@arl.net. We'll do it, and I'll get you on the list so you get directly.
Thank you, sir.
Quite welcome. Anybody else, you got that? So if you're getting your information indirectly, get it to me, and I'll make sure you get the information. Again, I want you to share. If anybody has interest in this, hams and non-hams, there's a lot of people involved with disaster communications.
It
Hey,
will be
Dan?
on YouTube.
Hey, Dan,
Yes, sir.
I see somebody ask a question. Do you use satellite comms for backup? We do have the ability to deploy any repeater anywhere in the state with satellite comms. And pretty much when you get there, as soon as the satellite makes the link, we can have statewide communications back through the satellite into the DMR network. It's automatically configured. The unit's already recognized. So as soon as it comes up, it auto logs in, and you have all the talk groups become active.
Super, super. With satellite, I use satellite at our mountain cabin, and the satellite has a lot of latency to it to give some situations a headache. Of course, everybody probably knows by now that what's it called, WinkStar or whatever it is, they got the lower level satellites are putting up, making it available. It's in beta right now. That's going to help a lot of people, especially in these disaster services using these kind of modes. Okay.
It's Starlink, and if it actually works, all of those satellite companies you're dealing with now are going to have to find a new way to earn money.
There is a bunch of lawsuits right now from those from Hughes and other places trying to slow down that process. It's progress going forward. But yeah, you're right. It's Starlink. I have mine ordered as soon as it comes in. I will give you my evaluation, of course. Anything else out there?
Thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you very, very much. If you know how to get a hold of us, you don't, well, we'll find a way to let you know. 73s, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Roger, will you come back periodically with updates?
Say that.
Will you come back periodically with updates, once a year or twice a year, whenever something big changes? What you learn, the rest of us are going to have to figure out.
Oh, okay. Well, I would be glad to happy to share any information we have. How's that?
We can make those accommodations. Very much like to have you come back.
Thank you.
All right. Last call. Anybody else?
7-3, everybody.
73. Again, thanks so much.
Hey, Dennis, can I call you before he breaks it?
Go ahead.
No, I wanted to ask Dennis if I could call him on his cell phone. He's gone.
Go right ahead. Give me a call.
Okay. All right. Bye, guys.